In the last section, we talked about the strong connectivity between the amygdala and the hypothalamus. So next, we're going to discuss the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus has a lot of different nuclei, but one we'll talk about in a bit more detail is the mammillary bodies because they appear to play a role in decorative memory. The hypothalamus is located at the bottom of the brain, beneath the thalamus. This shows the hypothalamus in relation to a few other structures, including the amygdala. This is a sagittal section of a human brain, a little bit out from the center line, and in this section the neuron somas are stained blue. If you focus your attention on this region in the middle, this enlargement shows the region in which the hypothalamus is located. And on the left, the same region is shown, but with a stain that colors axons dark, so that you can see some of the major axon bundles more clearly. There's the thalamus, and that's the anterior thalamus, which, as we discussed earlier, plays a role in memory. There are several prominent axon bundles in this region. You can see a bit of the optic nerve that carries information from the eyes to the thalamus, and the roughly circular area in cross-section is the anterior commissure. It runs perpendicular to this section and carries information between the two cortical hemispheres. But more significant for the hypothalamus are two more bundles, the fornix and the mammillothalamic tract. The fornix can be seen at the center bottom, rising and curving over the top of the thalamus, after which it heads on towards the hippocampus. The mammillothalamic tract links the anterior thalamus with the hypothalamus. Both of these axon bundles target the mammillary bodies, and some axons in the fornix reach the anterior thalamus by continuing on into the mammillothalamic tract. This is the location of the hypothalamus. Here it's shown in the axon stained section. It's not very clearly delineated and in fact has a very complex inhomogeneous structure. This is a drawing of some of the major nuclei that have been identified in the hypothalamus. Now, one prominent feature is that the hypothalamus is connected by a stalk down to the pituitary gland, and that stalk is called the infundibulum. The pituitary gland releases hormones into the bloodstream that regulate the body in various ways, and the hypothalamus gets information from the bloodstream by special purpose sensory organs. So the hypothalamus is a key route by which the brain regulates the body. The hypothalamus is a very complex arrangement of neurons. There are maybe 50 different regions with neurons generating different neurotransmitters. Some regions are hard to distinguish, but the more easily distinguished regions are often called nuclei. Within one region, there may be multiple neurotransmitters with different effects on the brain. The total number of neurotransmitters generated by different neurons in the hypothalamus isn't known exactly, but almost all the neurotransmitters common in other structures are also generated by the hypothalamus. To give an example, in the mammillary body projection to the anterior thalamus that goes over the mammillothalamic tract, several different neurotransmitters are utilized. The neurotransmitters in the projection from the supramammillary area back to the hippocampus over the fornix uses different neurotransmitters depending on the exact target within the hippocampus. The mammillary bodies at the back and base of the hypothalamus are strongly interconnected with the hippocampal system, and damage to the mammillary bodies has long been suspected of causing memory deficits in humans. In the deficit called Korsakoff syndrome, long-term alcoholism results in a deficiency of the vitamin thiamine, and this deficiency can lead to damage to the mammillary bodies, although sometimes there's damage to other parts of the hippocampal system. In patients with Korsakoff syndrome, there's a loss of all ability to create new fact or event memories, and also loss of some previous memories for events, very similar to the symptoms exhibited by the patient Henry Molaison, who had surgical damage to his hippocampal system. Damage strictly limited to the mammillary bodies is rare, but in one such case, a patient with a tumour in the mammillary bodies, only the ability to remember new information was affected. No memories of past events appeared to be lost. But the mammillary bodies are somewhat atypical. More often, a hypothalamic nucleus targets the entire brain, including thalamus, cerebellum, and all the different areas of the cortex. But unlike the large axon bundles coming into the mammillary bodies, these projections tend to be diffuse and non-specific. Inputs to the other hypothalamic nuclei from the cortex tend to come mainly from the prefrontal cortex, especially the orbital and medial areas. Then there's the reciprocal connectivity between the hypothalamus and the amygdala that we looked at earlier. So this summarizes the typical connection patterns of the hypothalamic nuclei. Information comes in about the state of the body, derived from the blood, plus inputs from the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. Outputs target the entire brain, but also regulate the body via the pituitary gland. So what's the role of the hypothalamus? There does seem to be some relationship between different major nuclei and different general types of behavior. Some nuclei play roles in maintaining body homeostasis, keeping parameters like body temperature within an appropriate range by initiating mechanisms like shivering or sweating. It regulates appetite and thirst on the basis of glucose and water levels in the blood. It adjusts body parameters like blood pressure and the degree of arousal throughout the day, including the wake-sleep cycle. Then, it also plays roles in emotion-driven behaviors, for example, making appropriate body adjustments in response to external threats, such as increasing heart rate and blood pressure. Hypothalamus also affects complex behaviors linked with these body requirements. For example, it influences initiation of food-seeking behaviors. And as discussed, it also plays a role in memory. So, if we summarize the general roles where the hippocampus seems to have a function, and compare with the amygdala, you can see that there are some general similarities. Perhaps we can summarize those as both play roles in different emotions, with perhaps the hypothalamic role being a little more basic and specific. And it can be observed that the hypothalamus tends to synapse on a wide range of neurons and its targets, while the amygdala tends to synapse on more specific targets. And recall also that there's the strong reciprocal connectivity between the hypothalamus and the amygdala. So in summary, the hypothalamus is a very complex combination of nuclei that target widely all across the brain and have strong reciprocal connectivity with the amygdala. And the hypothalamus plays a role in regulating the body, but also combines with the amygdala to play a role in emotion. And the two structures also seem to play a role in declarative memory.